She watches the spinning wheel through tears that won't stop falling. 3 rooms, 3 nights, 3 impossible transformations that will either crown her queen or leave her corpse rotting in a tower that smells like hay and desperation. But it's the 3rd night that breaks her, because that's when she realizes the straw isn't the only thing being transformed. Her soul is unraveling with every revolution of that wheel. And the creature who saves her? He doesn't want gold. He doesn't want jewels. He wants something that doesn't exist yet. Something that will grow inside her body and emerge screaming into a world that's already claimed it as payment for her survival. Most people think Rumpelstiltskin is about a girl who outsmarts a demon. They're wrong. It's about what happens when you trade pieces of yourself for survival, and how those pieces compound interest in ways that destroy everything you thought you were building. It's about the price women pay in systems designed to consume them, and the ancient hunger that feeds on desperation itself. Sinister stories, where we don't just tell stories, we excavate the corpses buried beneath them. Today, we're going somewhere most people refuse to look. We're going into the spinning room, where the wheel never stops turning and the price keeps getting higher. And once you understand what's really happening in that tower, you'll realize this story has been playing out for thousands of years. The straw was never just straw. The gold was never just gold. And Rumpelstiltskin? He's still here wearing different faces, making different bargains, but always taking more than he gives. The tower isn't just a room. It's a uterus made of stone, and the maiden has been placed inside it to either create life from death or die trying. Everything about this space screams biological horror dressed up as fairy tale architecture. The straw piled to the ceiling represents the raw, unprocessed material of feminine existence. Cheap, disposable, something you throw on floors for animals to soil. The king's demand isn't about wealth. It's about forcing transformation at gunpoint. He's saying, take your worthless feminine labor and transmute it into something that serves male power, or cease to exist. The spinning wheel becomes the instrument of this impossible alchemy, and every woman who hears this story recognizes the wheel immediately, because they've been sitting at their own versions their entire lives. In medieval symbolism, spinning was exclusively women's work, but not just any work. It was the work of creating something from nothing, of taking raw chaos and imposing order through endless, repetitive motion. The 3 fates spin the threads of human destiny. The Virgin Mary is often depicted spinning. Sleeping Beauty pricks her finger on a spindle. The wheel appears again and again as the instrument through which feminine power either creates or destroys. But here's where the symbolism gets vicious. The maiden isn't spinning thread, she's spinning gold. She's being forced to take her labor and transform it not into something useful, but into something purely valuable to male accumulation. The thread can't clothe anyone. The gold can't feed anyone. It only has worth because the king's treasury demands it, because patriarchal power structures have decided that this specific transformation is the only one that matters. The tower door locks from the outside. She can't leave. She can't refuse. She can't negotiate. The only options are transformation or death, and both options require her to sit at that wheel and spin until something breaks. This is the condition of feminine existence compressed into a single image. Produce value from worthlessness, create gold from garbage, transform yourself into something useful to power or die in the attempt. The straw starts to look different when you realize it represents every undervalued hour of women's labor throughout history, every invisible contribution, every dismissed skill, every "it's just" that precedes women's work. The story gives her 3 nights, and this number isn't accidental. 3 stages, 3 transformations, 3 opportunities to sell pieces of herself to survive one more rotation of the wheel. Each night represents a deeper level of self-cannibalization, disguised as salvation. Night 1, she trades her necklace. The necklace sits against the throat, the place of voice, communication, self-expression. She sells her ability to speak her own truth for the first survival. Rumpelstiltskin spins the straw while she watches, learning that silence is the price of continuance. The gold appears, and the king's appetite grows. Of course it does. Systems that feed on exploitation always escalate their demands when you prove you can meet them. Night 2. She trades her ring. The ring goes on the finger, the hand, the instrument of action and agency. She sells her capacity to reach out, to grasp, to hold on to anything of her own for the second survival. The symbolism deepens. First voice, then action. She's systematically dismantling herself to satisfy an appetite that will never be full because it's not about the gold. It's about the consumption itself. Night 3 is where the horror becomes total. She has nothing left to trade but the future. Rumpelstiltskin doesn't ask for her past. He's already taken that through the necklace and ring. He doesn't want her present. That belongs to the king now, her body transformed into a queen-shaped container for producing value. He wants her future, specifically the part of her future that will grow in her body and emerge as a separate being. The firstborn child isn't just a baby. It's the symbolic representation of women's ultimate creative power, the ability to generate new life. And she trades it. She agrees to give away the one thing she might create that belongs entirely to her, because the alternative is dying right now, and the future always seems abstract enough to sacrifice when the present is crushing you. The spinning wheel's motion is circular, eternal, hypnotic. It never progresses to a destination. It just rotates endlessly, returning to where it began. This is the perfect symbol for women's labor under patriarchal systems. Constant motion that produces value extracted by others, while the laborer remains in exactly the same position, spinning, always spinning, never advancing. Every revolution of the wheel represents another hour stolen, another piece of feminine potential converted into masculine wealth, another rotation of the extraction machine that keeps women productive but never empowered. The maiden watches Rumpelstiltskin spin, and she's learning. She's learning that survival requires transformation, that transformation requires sacrifice, and that sacrifice becomes a habit that eventually consumes everything you thought you were protecting. The gold piling up around her represents the visible value she's creating while becoming progressively more hollow. With each night she loses more of herself, while the room fills with more treasure. The math is simple and vicious. Feminine worth decreases as feminine production increases. The more gold she creates, the less of her remains to create it. Medieval audiences understood this symbolism viscerally because they lived it. Women's labor was essential but invisible, valued but unpaid, constant but unacknowledged. The spinning wheel was both their tool and their prison, the instrument through which they created value that enriched everyone except themselves. When the maiden finally becomes queen, she hasn't escaped the tower. She's just moved into a larger one. The castle is still a cage. Her body still belongs to the king's dynasty, and the wheel is still turning. Marriage isn't liberation in this context, it's the transfer of her productive capacity from one form of ownership to another. The year she has before Rumpelstiltskin returns isn't freedom. It's the grace period every debt collector offers, the brief illusion of having escaped before the compound interest comes due. She spins as a maiden, marries as a transaction, and births as an obligation, and none of these transformations belong to her. The wheel never stops, the straw never runs out, and the tower, whether literal or metaphorical, always has room for one more woman learning to spin gold from her own diminishment. Rumpelstiltskin appears at precisely the moment when hope dies. Not before. Before, she's still trying to figure it out herself, still believing maybe there's a way through this that doesn't require selling pieces of her soul. But once she's exhausted every possibility, once she's sat with the wheel and the straw and the impossible task long enough to understand that death is the only outcome without intervention, that's when he materializes. He doesn't break in. He doesn't force entry. The door opens for him because desperation always unlocks from the inside. This is crucial. The maiden lets him in. She makes the choice, which means she can never claim she was purely victim, never pretend she didn't participate in her own consumption. The system is designed this way intentionally. It creates conditions so intolerable that the only escape requires you to become complicit in your own destruction. Rumpelstiltskin doesn't look like the devil. He's small, strange, almost ridiculous. This is how exploitation always presents itself. Not as grand demonic bargains with obvious costs, but as quirky little transactions that seem manageable in the moment. He's not asking for her soul in a theatrical display of Faustian drama. He's just asking for a necklace, just a ring. Just this one small thing that you won't even miss probably. And in exchange, you get to live another day. The compound interest structure of his demands is mathematically perfect. Each payment buys progressively less time while costing progressively more of her essential self. First night, a necklace for 1 room of gold. Second night, a ring for 1 room of gold. Third night, her entire genetic future for 1 room of gold. The price inflates while the return remains static, which is exactly how debt functions when you're trapped in a system designed to extract rather than exchange. He's not a demon from hell. He's the demon of logic itself, the cold arithmetic that says survival justifies any transaction, that the future is always worth sacrificing for the present, that you can always figure out the consequences later, as long as you make it through right now. When Rumpelstiltskin demands her firstborn child, he's not asking for a baby. He's asking for her future tense. He's asking for the version of her that might exist beyond this moment of crisis. The woman who might have agency and creative power, that belongs entirely to herself. The firstborn represents potential uncontaminated by the deals she's already made. And that's precisely what makes it valuable to the system that's consuming her. The year between her promise and his return is the cruelest part of the tale. She becomes queen, bears the child, and for those 12 months she gets to pretend the debt doesn't exist. This is the grace period every predatory system offers. The brief window where you can almost believe you've escaped, where the weight of what you've agreed to hasn't fully manifested yet. The baby grows in her body, and she knows, she must know, that it's already been claimed. But the human mind is infinitely capable of denying future consequences when the present feels stable. When Rumpelstiltskin returns, her shock and grief are genuine. She's managed to forget, or bury, or rationalize away the promise she made in that tower. This is how compound debt destroys people, not through the initial transaction, but through the accumulating weight of consequences that arrive long after you've spent the borrowed time. The baby in her arms is real. The deal she made is abstract memory. Of course she wants to renegotiate. Of course she offers other payment. Of course she weeps and begs and can't believe he's actually going to hold her to terms she agreed to when she was desperate. But the debt always comes due. The future always arrives, and the person you become after making impossible deals is never positioned to pay what you promised when you were someone else. She's queen now, insulated by status and wealth, and she genuinely cannot understand why this strange little man won't accept gold instead of her child. She's forgotten that gold is what started this entire catastrophe. She's forgotten that she is what she is because she traded authenticity for survival, voice for continuance, future for present. The story gives her 3 days to guess his name, and this reversal seems like hope, a puzzle she can solve, an intellectual challenge instead of an impossible transaction. But the name isn't a puzzle, it's a revelation, and what it reveals is worse than the original deal. Rumpelstiltskin. Say it slowly. Feel how your mouth has to work to produce those syllables, how your tongue trips and stumbles, how the sounds don't flow naturally but jerk and spasm like something breaking. The name sounds like tearing fabric, like bones snapping, like reality itself stuttering and glitching. It's not a name you could forget or mishear. It's a name that announces its own wrongness, that carries its own violation in every consonant. When the messenger reports hearing the name, he describes Rumpelstiltskin dancing around a fire, singing about how, tomorrow, tomorrow, the child is mine. The creature is celebrating prematurely, performing his victory before it's secured. This isn't stupidity. It's revelation. He wants to be named. He needs to be named. Because naming him completes the circuit of her self-awareness. It forces her to recognize what she's become and what she's done. The moment she speaks his name, he doesn't vanish like a defeated demon. He tears himself apart. He stamps so hard his leg drives into the ground, then rips himself in half trying to extract it. This isn't the behavior of a creature being banished by magical knowledge. This is the behavior of a truth that cannot exist once it's been articulated. The psychological defense mechanism shattering under direct observation. Here's the horror. Rumpelstiltskin was never separate from her. He's the externalization of her own survival logic, the personification of the deals she's made and the pieces she's sacrificed. When she names him, she's naming her own complicity, her own participation in the system that's consumed her. She's recognizing that the demon who wants to take her child is the same force that allowed her to become a mother in the first place. The wheel is still spinning. The gold is still piling up somewhere in the castle treasury, and she's still queen of a kingdom built on the transformation of worthlessness into value through the sacrifice of everything authentic. Naming Rumpelstiltskin doesn't defeat him. It just forces her to see that she's been spinning her own destruction since the first night in the tower, and that every revolution of that wheel has been pulling her future into her present, consuming tomorrow to survive today. The child stays with her. The story calls this victory, but she'll spend the rest of her life looking at that child and remembering the woman who promised to give it away and wondering if the person she had to become to survive deserved to keep it at all. The real horror of Rumpelstiltskin isn't the demon or the deal. It's the recognition that the maiden makes every choice herself. She lets him in. She offers the necklace. She promises the ring. She agrees to trade her firstborn. And in making these choices under impossible conditions, she reveals the truth about how power maintains itself, not through overt force, but by creating situations where exploitation becomes the only logical response to systemic violence. The spinning wheel appears in countless fairy tales because it represents something fundamental about how patriarchal systems extract value from feminine labor. It takes raw material, transforms it through repetitive motion, and produces something that enriches everyone except the person doing the work. The wheel in Rumpelstiltskin just makes this process explicit. It shows you the tower, the locked door, the impossible demand, and the choice that isn't really a choice between transformation and death. But here's what most people miss. The maiden becomes queen. She keeps her child. She appears to win, and this is the most insidious part of the tale. The system rewards her compliance with survival and status, teaching every woman who hears this story that making deals with demons is actually how you get ahead. It's not a warning, it's a blueprint. The straw never runs out because women's undervalued labor is infinite. The gold never satisfies because patriarchal appetite is endless. And Rumpelstiltskin never really dies because the logic of compound debt, of sacrificing future selves for present survival, of trading authenticity for acceptance. That logic is immortal. It just keeps finding new towers, new maidens, new impossible demands that can only be met through self-cannibalization. Every woman who's ever sat at her own metaphorical spinning wheel knows this story in her bones. The specifics change. The tower becomes an office, a marriage, a set of beauty standards, an economic system that demands you be infinitely productive while remaining infinitely grateful. But the mechanism is identical. Transform yourself into something valuable to power or cease to exist. The wheel keeps turning. The price keeps escalating. And somewhere in the distance you can still hear the sound of a strange little creature dancing around a fire, singing about tomorrow. The gold was never worth it. But by the time you realize that, you've already promised away everything you needed to escape. If this excavation into the dark foundations of Rumpelstiltskin revealed something you recognized in your own life, you're not alone. These stories have been teaching us to participate in our own consumption for centuries, disguised as tales of triumph and happily ever after. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we're just getting started tearing apart the fairy tales you thought you knew. Next time, we're going somewhere even darker, into a story where the tower isn't just a prison. It's a tomb that women build for themselves, stone by stone, sacrifice by sacrifice. Drop a comment below and tell me, what's your spinning wheel? What impossible transformation are you being forced to perform just to survive? What have you already traded without realizing the compound interest was accumulating? Let's name these demons together, because that's the first step to recognizing how deeply they have woven themselves into everything we think we chose. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's sitting in their own tower right now, watching their own version of Rumpelstiltskin appear, and wondering if the deal he's offering is the only way out. It's not. But you have to see the wheel clearly before you can stop spinning. The stories they told us were never just stories. They were instructions, warnings, and blueprints all wrapped up in pretty language and false comfort. We're here to unwrap them, to pull apart the threads, to see what they've been teaching us to accept as inevitable. The wheel is still turning, but you don't have to keep spinning. Subscribe, comment, share, and let's keep excavating the corpses buried beneath the tales that raised us. Because the only way out is through the truth, no matter how sharp it cuts on the way down.